Okay, so if you remember, you guys, um, last time we mentioned a concept of love um, in the Duchess of Malfi that's called Petrarchan love. Do you remember Petrarchan love? No, huh? So that was the thing that I was talking about. If you go back to my lecture, because my lecture is recorded, are you able, by the way, to access my recorded lecture from last time on LMS on topic 12? If you go to topic 12 on the system on LMS, you'll be able to access that lecture. And if you go and listen to it again, Nuha, you'll remember that I was trying to tell you that Petrarchan love, it should not be associated with something positive here. Because I remember that I had students before um, who misunderstood the concept of Petrarchan love, okay, and thought that, and they had a question on Petrarchan love to describe it and talk about it, and they referred to it as something positive, okay? That it shows how devoted Antonio is, that Antonio is so devoted to the Duchess and he loves her so much. And they were talking about it in a very positive way. But actually, the whole point of introducing you to the concept of Petrarchan love, okay, is for you to realize how modern the Duchess is as opposed to Antonio. Because Antonio's vision when it comes to love is really kind of outmoded, because Petrarchan love is a really outmoded style or type of loving. Do you understand what I'm saying here? And so when exaggerated description of love, amazing, Sarah. Yes, exaggerated. And so pompous also. Do you know what pompous means? Pompous is really kind of in the realm of pretentious. It's like a way that kind of transcends something that's normal. In a way, it just feels like, what the hell, are you for real? You know what I mean? If you understand what I'm saying, it's just like really exaggerated in a way that's not even flattering. You know, sometimes when someone describes the way they love someone and their devotion, you feel like it's kind of nice and beautiful. And sometimes you kind of start feeling that it's like archaic and exaggerated and like just feels weird. And so I think it really falls in that category. And that is why when you talk about Petrarchan love, I want you to keep in mind that this example really shows you how modern the Duchess of Malfi is. Because I want to ask you a question. Does the Duchess of Malfi follow the rules of her society of a proper feminine conduct in her relationship with Antonio? Does she follow what is expected of her in the society of the time, according about the right way to behave as a female, the proper feminine conduct, like I already said? She doesn't. So, what is it? What does this tell us about her? What does this tell us about her personality or her character? That she is a very modern figure for her time, right? Also, it tells us another thing, that she is ahead of her time. Do you know what it means when I say that she's ahead of her time? You don't know what I mean when I say that the Duchess of Malfi is ahead of her time? That she's a very modern figure, like I already told you. She's a very modern figure. She's really practical. She falls in love with Antonio. She goes ahead and tells him, "Hey, I love you. I want to be with you." Does she wait for him to come and to court her? Does she wait for him? Or does she take initiative? Does she take initiative or does she wait for the man? Mm-hmm. Yeah, she defies the cultural norms of accepted feminine conduct, right? And so that's what I want you to know. And that's like when we talked about the gender role, reversal of gender roles. Do you remember when we talked about reversing the gender roles? Here, you kind of see a female character who's ahead of her time, who's really modern, who really goes against the teachings or the proper way women are supposed to behave in their society of the time. She's independent for sure, and she makes her own decisions, and that's something that's not acceptable by her brothers, of course. So let's move forward. I'm not sure what's going on. I think my slides are stuck, you guys. Do you see any change in my slides? I think the slides are stuck. Hello? Hello? Guys, can you still hear me? Do you hear me? Maybe I should try to log out and log back in. I'm not sure what's going on. Hello, guys. I'm sorry, the system kicked me out, so I had to log out and log back in, okay? So, but now you hear me. Everything is fine, right? Okay, so let's resume. Let's resume. Now we get to Act 3 here, in Scene 1. This act is interesting because it functions, the scene in this act functions to show that there has been a time that elapsed, so since Ferdinand's vow of revenge. So 3 years have passed. The Duchess is already married. She's been pregnant. She gave birth to a first child. And during this whole time, the brothers have been trying to figure out who the sister got married to. Okay? Did she get married? They didn't even know that it's Antonio. And that's why, who was working as a spy to know what the Duchess were about? Can you tell me? Who's the spy that works for Ferdinand? Anybody? Guys, I hope that you're still hearing me. You still hear me? So it is Bussola. I think it's probably hard. Yes, Bussola, sorry. Sarah. Well, true. So they're trying to figure out who she's married to. And during this time, the Duchess also has given birth to two more children, a son and a daughter. Ferdinand, of course, returns to the Duchess's court because, each one of them is a ruler for a different state in Italy. So she is the Duchess of what? Malfi. And so they don't live in the same place. And that is why it's easy for the Duchess to hide some aspects of her personal life, who she's married to, giving birth, having more children, etc. And this time Ferdinand, her brother, still shows his intentions of revenge. And he says about his sister, her guilt treads on hot, burning, okay? Like the way he's describing his sister's guilt. He thinks that she feels guilty because she's married to someone that they do not approve of. He also states that he will force confession from her in that particular night. So he says, I am here, I am back, and I will not leave this court until I make her confess who she's married to and why she did this. So Ferdinand, of course, asks Bussola for for her bed chamber, for the Duchess' bed chamber, and of course we know Ferdinand's intentions of visiting his sister on that night. So this makes the suspense grow, and so John Webster is known for using the suspense technique in presenting his plays. So let's go ahead and learn more about suspense. What is suspense? There's a very famous film director, Alfred Hitchcock. He's considered a master of suspense. He was once asked in an interview how he stimulates a suspense in an audience. And basically, he used the example of a bomb in a movie scene that's underneath a table where there are a lot of people. He says, which would be better if no one who's watching, like let's assume there's an audience and watching that scene with the bomb, okay? What would be better if we just never introduce the bomb to the audience at all, and then suddenly, boom, the bomb goes off. Everyone is dead. Is there suspense in there? Do you think there's any suspense when you have a scene like this? No, exactly. No suspense. Um, but what if you introduce the scene like this, okay? You have the bomb and you let the audience know about the bomb. The audience know that there is a timer on this bomb. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, all the way to 0. Boom! Is there suspense in this? We're like, oh my God, is it gonna go off? Is it gonna is someone gonna disconnect it? So you have that growing suspense, right? And this is basically how John Webster does his scenes, where we have the audience. We are the people who know what's about to happen or what might happen. We know that the Duchess is going to be alone. She's in a very happy moment with her husband, Antonio, in scene 2. The scene is portrayed in a nice way that shows mutual affection and love expressed in a very sentimental way. But at the same time, we know as audience that this moment is not going to last, because we know that the moment Antonio is leaving, Ferdinand has a key to that chamber, right? And that he's going to go in her room and what? Confront her, right? And so we have that growing suspense as an audience who know more than the actual actors or the actual characters in the play, right? About things that are about to unfold. And so this technique is considered really effective, because we suspect that this moment of happiness between the Duchess and her husband, that's filled with love and playfulness, will be shattered soon by the presence of Ferdinand. Okay. So this also shows a turning point, a scene that gives us a turning point when we see Antonio leaving, okay, and the Duchess is left in all alone. We know that she's in a very isolated and vulnerable situation. The Duchess does not know that they have left, Antonio has left, so she continues chatting with Antonio. And then Ferdinand enters her chamber and he's standing in her husband's place. That's also, in a way, a pun, because we know when Ferdinand is standing in the husband's place, we know what is going on in his mind, because Ferdinand seems to be obsessed with his sister, right? Have you all read the play? Have you already gotten that basically feel that Ferdinand is obsessed with his sister in a very unhealthy way? Kind of creepy. You're like, what's this creep doing? So you feel like it really goes beyond the idea of preserving family honor or preserving family eliteness. You feel like his obsession with his sister transcends all of that, right? And so we do have that insight that this particular brother seems to be overtly obsessed with his sister, right, guys? It's like overt with him. Mm-hmm. So again, like I said, we have this as a turning point in the play. The Duchess is in a place of vulnerability. She is talking to her husband, but actually the one who's assuming his role and is standing in his place is really her brother, Ferdinand. So when Ferdinand starts speaking, we sense in his language this irritation, anger. He's agitated. He uses rhetorical questions with his sister. For example, when he says something to her like, virtue, where art thou hid? What is he basically saying? Where is your virtue hiding? Where is virtue hiding? Right? Do you really think he's asking her a real question? Can you tell me like how chaste you are? Will you tell me where your virtue is? He's not really asking her. He's basically saying, hey, you're a whore. That's basically what he's saying, right? He's shaming her. He's trying to reproach her, shame her. He's using her like psychological manipulation. Have you ever heard of psychological manipulation? So he's really psychologically manipulating her and trying to crack her, trying to break her spirit, if you may, okay? And so, like I said, he's trying to shame her. And then he says, die then quickly. So Ferdinand's speech to his sister is alienating. What does it mean? Because his language that he uses is suggests moral anxiety about his own conduct, because he realizes on a deep level, on an inner psychological subconscious level, there is an anxiety, an underlying anxiety about his own conduct and his own behavior. And so we realize at this point that morally speaking and psychologically, Ferdinand has a complex character, okay? And we kind of see that in this scene, and a little bit later, it will also unfold even more. So Ferdinand is still ignorant of her husband's identity. He still does not know that the husband is Antonio, but he still assures her that she will be ruined. So what are we to learn from this scene? He's threatening her, trying to break her spirit. We realize that violence that's being used here is not physical violence. So can you be violent towards someone just with your language? Can you be abusive with someone? Is abuse only a physical thing, you guys, or can abuse also be psychological, and can it be used with language? And if you notice that Ferdinand is not even being subtle about his manipulation toward his sister. Okay, let's move. Okay, what do we know about Bussola, Duchess, and Ferdinand? Let's see. What else do we have here? Okay. How does the Duchess appear in this particular scene? For those of you who have read the play, you know she's really confident, in control. She's not shaky at all. She doesn't show him that she's scared or that he's actually really, the manipulation game is working with him. Her voice, her posture. If you're actually watching the adaptation, the stage adaptation of the Duchess of Malfi, you can see the way she's standing, her posture, her body language. I mean, we here in this world of the social media world, you see a lot of people who talk about analyzing body language, right? Like if you put your hands together, if you move your hands in a certain way, if you put your hand over your eyebrow, like all of that kind of suggests a certain anxiety or a certain thing about your inner psychology, right? And so here we're kind of analyzing the Duchess's behavior based on her body language. And Webster alludes to that a lot. A lot of time we notice that we are introduced to body language and analyzing characters and analyzing scenes based on body language rather than actually language. Okay. And so, like I said, she seems to be really confident and she responds to her brother's accusations and his questions in a very clear and straightforward tone. Okay. So, no shaky voice, no sign of weakness at all um, uh, that is being shown by the Duchess. Okay. So she knows that her marriage is radical. We already talked about this last time. We said that the Duchess of Malfi, do you think when she did that move, when she made the decision to get married to someone who comes from a lower class than hers, did she realize at the time that she was doing something radical? Or do you think she's like, maybe everything will be fine? Maybe nothing will happen. Do you think that she was a naive person who thought that this could just pass with no problems? Or do you think that she fully realizes how radical she's being? She realizes, right? Yeah, I'm reading your responses, you guys. Okay. And so her simplicity in her expression shows the irrationality of her brother's behavior. And we're going to see this very soon in the pilgrimage scene when we have outsiders who are looking at the whole situation and assessing it. She knows that she's going to face problems. Exactly, Sarah. Yes, yes, yes. She knows so. Just give me a second. Let me just take a sip of water. Okay. And so she realizes how radical she is, but the behavior, the illogical, behavior, irrational behavior of her brothers, kind of show us. It makes the audience sympathize with her. We sympathize with her. We do know how radical she is being for her time. She's going against the teachings of her society, or she's going against tradition. Her reaction is also different from Antonio because we know she's a person who's in control. So instead of threatening and weeping, what does she do? She immediately starts thinking about a plan. What a plan can we execute? What can we do? How can we face this problem? So does Antonio do the same thing? How do they both react to this problem that they're facing? Is Antonio okay? Let me put it this way: is Antonio as assertive as the Duchess in his response to this obstacle that they're facing, or is she stronger? If you think that the Duchess is stronger than Antonio in facing this problem, just write down that the Duchess seems to handle this problem better. Let me know. She is stronger. Yes, yes. Who else? Yeah. And so I'll be reading. Yes, she's stronger. I'll be reading your answers, but I'm just gonna keep on talking and continue my discussion. So she's more able to deal with this situation without being emotionally stirred. Okay, so she's trying to think logically of what can we do instead of just panicking, right? Yeah, true, Nuha. That's true. Ferdinand, he enters. He gives his sister a what? A poniard. It's a dagger. It's like you know what a dagger is, right? What is a dagger in Arabic? Khanjar? Khanjar, right? A dagger. And so, in a way, when he's holding that, this both is a method of threatening his sister. Just remember what I said 5 minutes ago about how the play focuses on body language and the use of things as metaphors, okay, to indicate a meaning behind it that goes beyond words and language. And so here, when he has a dagger with him, and it's there, and he gives it to the sister, like, oh, here's a dagger. In a way, it kind of implies a performance of his masculinity. Do you know what I mean? A performance of masculinity. Like, I'm a man, and we know, like, men, like in wars, they hold swords, daggers, knives, arrows, right? And so, is it a display of masculinity? 100%, because the setting is in the bedroom, and Ferdinand is standing in her husband's place, and so this also shows dynamics of his psychological complexity of dominating his sister. Do you think that he fantasizes about dominating his sister? He definitely does. And so in a way, this scene reveals to us the depth of his psychology, and also the dynamics of how complex, what a complex person he is. Ferdinand, his continual threats show that he's a person who's capable of violence, okay? And that also might translate to real situations that are going to be unfolding in this particular play. Okay, so we're moving forward. Slide 10. There are slides that are kind of repetitive, so I'm probably just gonna go over them, like really gloss over them really quickly. Bussola, we get to Bussola because we're trying to really understand the psychology of each of these people that we are dealing with over here. Because when you understand them, and when you understand their characters really well, it kind of makes you understand what they're capable of, or it kind of makes you you're more able to analyze their behavior. He seems to agree with Duchess about Antonio's good nature and social merits. He's put in a very awkward position because we talked about it. He's a person who is Bussola is trying to transcend his status. We know that the Italian society that's being described to us in the play is a very hierarchical society. Do you know what hierarchical means? Hierarchical society. And it's very stratified. It depends on your status. Do you come from an aristocratic family? Do you come from a low-born person? If you're a peasant, etc. And so it's a very stratified society. Guys, are you still listening to me? I'm just trying to make sure that you're listening to me. Okay. And so, like I said, this man, Bussola, he's not as bad as Iago in Shakespeare's Othello. He's just a person who is being placed in a very difficult situation. He wants to transcend his status. At the same time, he also harbors only good feelings toward the Duchess and Antonio. So he has really nothing against them on a personal level. It's all about just getting to what he wants, like the means justify the end. الغاية تبرر الوسيلة, right? So Bussola at this point has a soliloquy at the end of this scene, in which he tells the audience that he will inform Ferdinand tonight of everything he knows, and he's going to reveal the identity of the husband, and he's going to tell him about the children that they have together. And so we sometimes don't understand Bussola a little, because he seems to be inconsistent in what he shows to the audience. Sometimes he's such a nice person, and sometimes he's a complete opposite. And I think I've already explained that to you. That inconsistency really comes, I think, from a guilt that's underlying there. Do you think that this man feels guilty over what he's doing? Do you think he's guilty? He feels guilty? He does, okay? And you can write your answers and I can look at them while I'm talking. So he does feel guilty. In a way, we're trying to see these people as people. They're not flat characters, and that's for sure. So we're kind of learning more about them. And so now we're about to see Ferdinand's reaction to knowing all this information about his sister. Bussola does defend Antonio so many times, but like I said, he's just a person who's like torn between what he really wants and being loyal to the Duchess and her husband. How would you instruct the actor playing Bussola to act if you were directing this play? I want you to think of this on your own when you are when you go back and listen to this, or if you go and look at the slides later on, you can look at that and write your own comments on that. If you ever want to be a movie director, maybe, or a stage director. Now we get to the dumb show. What is the dumb show? Now we're learning a new concept here. The two brothers now know the husband's identity, okay? The cardinal and Ferdinand. They know who the husband is, and we know at this point that the Duchess and her family are trying to seek sanctuary in Ancona, okay? You know what a sanctuary is. Like when you're when you're a political person involved in politics, like a head of a state or a country, and then you face a very dangerous situation in your country, and you want to go to some kind of an ally of yours in another country that will give you, like, you can go and live and be safe over there, right? And so the cardinal around this time decides to resume his profession as a soldier, as opposed to what? A head of a state that's like a religious man. And so he says, I'm going to make sure that they get banished from Ancona and that they're not even going to make it there. And so two events happen here. We see the cardinal resuming soldiership, and the banishment of the Duchess and her family are used by the Webster to create this dumb show. A dumb show really is a show, you guys, in a play that shows you what is happening and how things are happening, but kind of silently. The people are not talking. There's a description of their behavior, and based on that description of the behavior, you kind of start realizing what is about to happen. Got it? So again, like I said, a dumb show is a performance employing gestures, body movements, without words. So we see the cardinal taking off what? It's a highly symbolic scene, of course, okay? It's also very theatrical. When you are only reading it, like here, like when you're reading it at home, you won't really understand the nuances of a dumb show. But if you're actually watching it unfold in front of you on the stage, in any adaptation, if you go and open an adaptation of the Duchess of Malfi on YouTube later, you'll understand what I'm talking about. I mean, you'll see the effectiveness. You'll see like full effect of a dumb show on stage. Cardinal taking off his religious symbols, all right? He takes off his cross, the cross, the necklace cross that they wear. He takes it off. He takes off the hat. He takes off his robe. He takes off his ring. So he takes them off. And the things that he takes off, they're symbols of what, you guys? What are they symbols of? Can you explain to me? Can you tell me? What are they symbolic of? The things that he takes off are symbols of religion, okay? And what does he put on? he puts on what? A soldier's costume, right? Sword, helmet, okay, shield, and spurs. So this completely confirms something that Antonio was talking about in the very first act. What was Antonio talking about in the first act, you guys? The superficiality of the Italian court, the fakeness of the Italian court, the corruption of the Italian court. Is that corruption of the Italian court being demonstrated in this scene? Are you now more aware of how corrupted this court is through the scene? Yes, definitely, because this shows you that the religious and political vocations, can be switched on and off and can be swapped. Okay, do you understand what I'm saying here? You take off your religious representations, you take off anything that represents the religion, and you put on your soldier outfit. You take off the soldier costume, you put on your religious stuff. In a way, it's just a show. It's all an act. It's all acting. You know, when you just like do an act in front of people of who you are, how amazing you are, how generous you are, and in reality, you're really none of that, but it's just an act. This is really what's happening over here. And at this point in the dumb show, the brothers, and especially the cardinal, is being exposed. Why is he being exposed? Because just silently, while he's doing that, and while he's trying to revenge, and while he's trying to banish his sister, we are realizing how corrupted this man is. And later on, of course, when he kills his own girlfriend, remember? Again, so here the Duchess' banishment is accompanied in this dumb show by the cardinal's violent removal of her wedding ring. So the cardinal approaches his sister and he removes her wedding ring violently off of her finger. This shows the vulnerability of the situation that the Duchess is in. Were they successful in escaping? No, they were not successful in escaping. Does this now show you like that she's in deep trouble over the decision that she made by marrying Antonio? Yes, definitely. And so what is interesting about the dumb show over here is that the audience, okay, watch the actors and the actresses, okay, and they watch their body movements, and so we're kind of seeing things from an objective perspective. You literally get the cardinal exposed without anybody talking about him. Do you need anybody to tell you that the cardinal or Ferdinand are bad people? Or do you kind of start realizing that and seeing it just by their actions and their body movements? You kind of really get that just from the gestures and the body movement. Okay, let's move forward. The slides are just not moving. I'm not sure what is going on. I hope that you're still able to hear me. Guys, do you still hear me? Guys? Okay, we're moving. The pilgrims. Okay, the pilgrim scene, also a scene that shows an objective side to this play. The dumb show, two things that make us as audience see things objectively. Let's assume you get a question in the exam that asks you, sorry, that show us two things or one thing or whatever things that demonstrate an objectiveness in assessing the character's behavior. You're going to use the dumb show, okay? And you're going to use the pilgrim scene. Because in the pilgrim scene, you have this framed dialogue of two pilgrims, two people. We don't even know their names. They're just called the pilgrims, okay? And they're watching the ceremony that happens, and they disapprove of the Duchess's behavior. My question would be, theoretically speaking, I mean, you're not going to be able to talk or write fast because I know how hard it is. My question to you, if we're in the classroom, is that who do these pilgrims represent? Do they represent people from the 20th century, for example? Do they represent people from another culture? No, the pilgrims are representatives of their own society, of the Duchess's society. They are objectively watching what's happening. And they do not agree that the Duchess's behavior in marrying Antonio is a correct one or a right one. Okay? But at the same time, they are two objective figures, or they are objective figures who think that even though the Duchess has been defiant in her behavior, and even though she did not follow the accepted behavior that the society allows, they just still think that the brother's reaction is what? What do they think of the brother's reaction toward their sister? Unjustified and also exaggerated. And so here we have people who are looking at this situation in a more balanced way, okay? So instead of saying this person is wrong and this person is right, they're trying to kind of be balanced in their assessing of this situation. Okay, now let's move forward. Okay, a lot of dramatic devices that I said are being used and are being employed in the play. We see characters that are complex. We already talked about this plenty, and it kind of shows them as more realistic characters. He involves the audience with this in like the dumb show and also in the pilgrim scene. So there is this involvement between the audience and the actors of the play. He used a lot of dramatic techniques that we discussed and talked about to show the corruption of the brothers and their superficiality in dealings in their courts. The moving between the slides is just really slow. It's just like not working all that well for me. I don't know why. Maybe it's the system. System is just being probably overloaded. I'm not sure, you guys. You can still hear me though, right? Guys, can you still hear me? Hello? Hello? Guys? People? People of the class, hello? I'm trying to move forward with the slides, but the system, the thing is just not allowing me. Yeah. Okay, I'll just talk about them from my own presentation here. So at your end, it will kind of be stuck, okay, guys? Okay, so I'll just use my PowerPoint. I'm sorry that is going to be stuck at your screen. So I'm just going to go ahead and continue, okay? Okay. And so in the dumb show, that's being used as dramatic scene, we see that that Webster pioneers at using it. Many playwrights used this same technique before him, but he really excelled at it. We kind of can assess the morality and the political implications of the characters that are involved in the play. And what's nice about the dumb show as a dramatic device is that you kind of get a response from the live audience. For example, when they're doing a certain scene that has singing or body movement, the audience starts calling on the actors, don't do this, do that, why are you doing this? So there is this kind of interaction between the audience and the actors. All right. I'm going to assume that you're still listening to me. Torture and death. Okay. The two scenes in Act 4, the first two scenes, show us the torture and death. Okay. Torture and death. Of the Duchess of Malfi. Okay. Because of her forbidden love and marriage to Antonio. The scenes are very strong and use devices that seem strange a little bit to the modern spectators. The dumb show, the suspense, the pilgrims, Sarah, the pilgrims. Because the pilgrims are part of the audience. The two pilgrims that are being used are audience who are trying to assess the situation in a kind of fair way. Do you understand what I mean? Like objectively assessing the problem between the Duchess and her brother. Got it? So okay, and so what do they do here to the sister? The torture is also being used as a technique. They imprison the sister, the Duchess. They placed her in an isolated place, in isolation. Then they expose her to a dead man's body. But it's of course it's not a real body, okay? It's made of wax. And sorry, first they present her before the body. They present her with a dead man's hand, and it has a wedding finger. A wedding finger? I meant with a hand with a wedding ring on the finger. Okay, do you hear me, guys? I don't want to be talking to myself. And so, you hear me, right? And these are considered part of the techniques of torture by the brothers presented to us. So she's also shown, like I told you, those wax bodies that are just like fake of her husband and children. And they're telling her these are the corpses or the bodies of your husband and of your children. Apparently, it tells me here that I was disconnected for a little bit. So I'm not sure whether you were listening to me when I was disconnected or not, to be honest with you. I really don't know. But I mean, let's hope that you listened to the majority of the things that I was saying. So what is the significance of showing the Duchess suffering on stage? There are many possible reasons for Webster's stage crafting scenes that kind of show psychological torture. He makes his revenger villain Ferdinand stage a play. So you kind of see a play within a play. Have you ever heard of the concept of the play within a play, guys? The play within a play. So the characters in the play can be actors and can be directors. And like Ferdinand, he's like directing a play and staging a play for his victim, his sister. She's the victim, and he's basically pretending like he killed her children and her husband. The dance as a mask. What does it mean? It's like a kind of spectacle that is presented in front of the Duchess of Malfi. Mad men, crazy men dancing, and in general, the dance of the madman as a mask is an elaborate courtly extravaganza favored by the court of James the First. Remember what we said about King James the First at the beginning of all this? Remember how we said that the Italian court mirrors the English court of King James? Do you remember this? And do you remember how we said that King James is very corrupted? He was a very corrupted king. If you're following with me, please just write yes or anything, just so I know. But anyway, so King James the First and his court were known for these extravaganza courts with these dances. And so Ferdinand presents to his sister the sad spectacle, and he wants to kind of basically drive her crazy, shake her, make her think that her husband and children are dead. So it's, again, another technique. And again, staging torture. A lot of revenge plays at the time did the technique of a play within a play. And a lot of, and because in the Renaissance, they did a lot of theatrical, there's an intimate relationship of the theatrical nature of revenge and Renaissance, okay, and tragedies. And it really speaks about the way that their courts used to punish people as well. So it's a kind of reflects on that. Anyway, Ferdinand the dramatist, I already explained this to you. Ferdinand really puts on a play, a whole play that he pretends in reality, not theater. And so again, we're watching his play inside this play. And the audience at this point are aware of how devious Ferdinand can be, and that he's using psychological methods to bring his sister down and to break her. The Duchess's death. How does she die? Webster devotes an entire act just to depict the Duchess's torture and death. This shows the significance of her suffering. We realize that Ferdinand's actions aim not merely to kill his sister. He actually says, I don't want to kill her. I just want to bring her to despair. I just want to break her spirit. But ultimately, the Duchess dies. And he basically, this is really a nice symbolic illustration of showing that sometimes you can be killed psychologically and you can die because of a psychological suffering. or manipulation, and you don't necessarily suffer. You won't be necessarily suffering from a physical problem to actually be brought down and die, right? If you're listening to me, are you guys listening to me? And so this suggests that there are two main reasons that help the Duchess have courage before her death. She sees death as an escape from a very unbearable life. At this point, I really think that the Duchess of Malfi realizes that there is no escape from her brothers. So she's like, probably psychologically speaking, assessing her situation and thinking, I might as well die as a strong person. If I am going to die anyway, if there is no escape from my situation, then I'm just going to face my situation with courage. Or probably she has power from her Christian faith. We don't know. Again, we see Ferdinand's attempt to bring his sister to despair, and he focuses our attention on the inner resources to enable her to endure her suffering. So maybe her religion helps her endure that kind of suffering. We see the Duchess of Malfi referring to religion when she's speaking to Antonio earlier in Act 3. She tells him, in the eternal church, sir, I do hope we shall not part thus. So in a way, we kind of feel that probably she's religious to a certain extent, but maybe the way that she's religious is not necessarily the typical religiosity that is presented to us in general. If you're here with me, guys. If you're not listening to me, I hope that this is recording and that you will be able to have access to it later on. And so, again, this shows that maybe the Duchess of Malfi is a religious person, but her own religiosity or the way that she sees religion is not necessarily the same as other people. It's not necessarily a traditional sense of believing in religion. And so you remember there is a scene when she told her husband, Antonio, earlier that it is the court, it is the church that should echo us and not us echoing the church. And so she has those strong stances when it comes to her own beliefs and that are just different from others, okay? That do not really they don't parallel the same beliefs of other people in her society, and she's fine with that. She is fine with being defiant. She knows she's radical, and she's willing to go all the way. Okay? Okay. Again, at a certain point in the torture scene, when they're really trying to insult her or bring her down or bring her human pride, to assault her human pride, basically, the Duchess of Malfi, at that point, she looks at Bussola and she says, I am the Duchess of Malfi still. And that's in Act 4, Scene 2. It's an affirmation of identity and pride. Because at the end of the day, like I said, you guys, you really cannot totally escape your society or your status or like your environment that you've been part of all your life, really. So although the Duchess of Malfi kind of escapes certain things in her society of the time, she doesn't comply. But at the same time, there are aspects of her personality where when she's being insulted, she tells Bussola, remember who I am. I am Duchess of Malfi. You are not going to break me, basically. And then also when Bussola asks her if death frightens her, if she's scared of death, she looks at Bussola, and especially that they present her with a coffin. And again, what's the use of using that coffin? Guys, this play is filled with symbolic scenes and metaphors, and dramatic scenes and dramatic techniques. And so please be aware of these and be on the lookout for certain techniques that are employed, like the coffin. They're trying to scare her. Oh, you're soon going to die. We're going to put you in this coffin where you're going to be buried. So who would be afraid on it, knowing to meet such an excellent company in the other world? She's like, whoa, why would I be scared of death, knowing that I'm going to meet such an amazing company in the afterlife? I might as well just get it over with and just get out of here. And so who is she referring to here? She's probably referring to her husband and children that because she thinks that they're already dead. In a way, it kind of shows you a moment of disparity, but I mean, it won't break her spirit, because I said she's a very, very, very strong woman, and she will not. I mean, if she lost her husband, if she had really lost her husband and children, why would she break? She has nothing else left to lose, right? Guys, are you still there? Are you still listening to me? So she has nothing left to lose. And that is why she's gonna hold her ground, okay? She's not going to change her mind. She's not gonna apologize. She's not gonna say, oh, I'm sorry, Ferdinand. I'm sorry, Cardinal. I shouldn't have done what I did. So she's not gonna do any of that, okay? It's just too late for that. And she realizes that. And she doesn't even want to do it. And so in her final speech, we kind of see an image of the Christian doctrine in her speech. Instead of imagining the soul flying to heaven, here we also have a reversal of hierarchies, because we talked about hierarchies before, and I told you about we have gender reversal roles. We also have a reverse here in hierarchies, because generally, or when we think about heaven and hell, we think of heaven as something that's above us. Like when you talk to God, you look at the skies, right? You look at the sky. You look at something above you. You never talk to God and look at the floor. So you always assume that heaven is elevated, right? Something that's elevated above you. And when you think of hell, you think of something debased that's kind of underneath, right? And so, but what does the Duchess over here, what does she do? She subverts the hierarchy. How does she subvert the hierarchy? She subverts the hierarchy by imagining that heaven gates, the gates of heaven are not so arched above. And she says, heaven gates are not so highly arched as princes' palaces. And this is very interesting here. It's a very critical commentary on what? On kings and kings, princes, and their palaces, their mansions, how they're out of touch with the general public. We see Antonio commenting on this at the very beginning of the play, when he talks about the corruption of courts. And so when Antonio talks about the corrupted court of Italy, this here really kind of mirrors that. So this really says that the Duchess of Malfi might be a really good duchess. She's probably a person who's aware of the suffering of the people and what they go through, what they endure. And so because she's using here religion to comment on the hypocrisy of people who hold certain positions of power, and they basically use it to control the others rather than to make the situation for their society or for their people a better one, if you understand what I'm saying here. So in a way, she says that God is loving, God is accepting, and people who are princes and kings actually think that they are much more elevated than real people. And so she says, I will not, and then ultimately what happens here, death is considered probably a salvation for her of an intolerable situation that she is facing. They come to execute her. Okay, the description of this method of execution will use that is being used to end her life. And we see them decide on strangling and watch it take place on stage. And that just shows you something that's horrifying. And before the Jacobean plays, by the way, so the Jacobean plays are famous for showing you really horrifying scenes that are really traumatic, okay, that are presented on stage, violence. They have violence in them. The other plays did not really show before. They probably would talk about how the execution happens, but without really showing it. But Jacobean plays kind of are known for presenting us with that, with that aspect. Okay, and so she's facing the terrors of death bravely. Okay, it shows you an individual heroism. And again, I told you the fact that we are watching the Duchess and following what she's doing and the way she's behaving really, again, speaks about the rising individualism of the time, where you have that one person that you're focused on, and that is presented in a certain heroic way, and we're being presented getting into their inner psychology as well and seeing how they behave regarding certain situations. Okay. Again, I already talked about all this. How does she perceive death? Very bravely. When she dies, when the Duchess dies, Bosola begins to feel some guilt. He wants to repent for his sins. He considers it a sin. But what's interesting is that his repentance does not come right away. He's like, I want to repent. But he only decides to repent when he realizes that Ferdinand did not want to kill his sister, and that Ferdinand actually does not want to give him money or any social status. And so he feels that he's been fooled by Ferdinand. And then after that, he starts to feel that he's moved and that he's really sad about the Duchess's death. Okay? And Ferdinand also begins to blame him. He begins to blame okay, I'm suddenly seeing all your chats here. Guys, if there were any interruptions, I hope that it was recording the whole time. So I hope that you can go back to the recording in a couple of hours when it's uploaded to the system, or later tonight or tomorrow, and you can listen to the recording, okay? Are you following? So if there has been any interruptions, I just hope that you'll be able to go over that in the recording, because I'm recording this whole thing. So far, I have recorded 75 minutes. Yeah. Okay, guys, listen, I'm going to stop here. Ferdinand's reaction towards his sister's death. How does he perceive it? And how does he actually starts here to unravel? His psychology starts to unravel. He starts imagining all kinds of stuff. And like I told you, I have already recorded 75 minutes. okay? And so I'm gonna stop here, and I hope that you are able to access this recording by tomorrow. It's gonna be uploaded under topic 12, okay? And if the university tells us to go ahead and continue with this, I'm gonna continue with this. If they tell us to stop, then I'm going to also let you know, all right?